Hey there. Welcome to this week's episode of Next Level Play Therapy, where we talk about everything and all things play therapy. This week, I want to talk about some of the challenges that play therapists experience that can weigh us down. I don't know how many of you feel like you are running on empty some days between your personal life, your workload, the intensity of the clients on your caseload. How many of you just feel like you are burnt out and crispy fried more days than you would care to admit? A- And I find this is something that is, I don't know, I think it's a big deal in the mental health community, and especially like in the play therapy community where I mostly spend my time talking with people, working with people, especially in Play Therapy Academy. These are things that come up in our meetings and on our group chat. And I think what I've noticed as I started Play Therapy Academy, I think 3 years ago now, that one of the benefits that I hear over and over and over and over is the support. Like, we come to our group meetings, or people, we have a group chat, and people in Play Therapy Academy will post challenging situations that go on, or we'll talk about, like, I remember one time we were staffing a client, and the parents were, one parent in particular was really, really, really challenging. And she told the story of what happened in her conversation with the parents during a session. And we were all just aghast, just like, oh my gosh, that did not happen. So, one, how much support does that give you when you're like, oh my gosh, okay, it's not just me. I'm not the only one thinking this is horrible. And maybe I'm not the worst therapist that ever walked the planet. And maybe others would be equally distressed if this happened to them. So just first, that power of community to be able to lift you up and support you. And then secondly, and I think equally as important, help you come up with some strategies. So when we staff cases in Play Therapy Academy, like this particular situation, we kind of walk step by step through, okay, let's better understand what is going on that contributed to this situation. We go through case conceptualization, which is a fancy way of saying that I gather all the information at that first session that I could gather at that first session, getting as many details as possible about what is going on, what's activating that problematic situation, and what are the patterns and factors that are sustaining it and or maintaining it, that are contributing, that need to shift. So what are the strengths, what, because we want to continue those, but also what are the problems that are maintaining it. So we walk through that process trying to figure that out. And when you work with children, you also work with parents. One of the number one things that I find play therapists struggle with is feeling confident and competent working with parents. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. One of the challenges. The other things I think, I talk to myself after I have conversations with myself sometimes after I committed to doing this topic for this episode. I thought to myself, girl, how are you going to get through all 5 of these in 30 to 40 40 minutes tops. So we're probably going to go a little bit quickly through all of these. If you want to take a deeper dive into some of these, I've talked about these before, which is one of the reasons I thought, well, I've talked about them before. So anybody who's been listening or watching any of the live stream replays or watching the live streams while I'm streaming live, so you can participate in the episode, or those of you listening to the podcasts, then you've probably heard some of these before. If you haven't, and maybe you're new this week, you're new to this live stream, then I would highly recommend that you pop over to my YouTube channel, which is Kathy Spooner Renewing Hearts Training. It's probably the easiest place to find everything. You can find all the live stream replays. You click on the live tab and you can find the podcast episodes. If you prefer podcasts, you can listen that way. Those are on there as well. I have way more live stream episodes because I've been doing this probably 3.5 years now, maybe 4. I don't know. I lost track at this point. So there's a lot more of those, and you can also find podcast episodes. So if you want to go a little deeper, then you can go and check out some of those previous live stream replays if you would like. If for those of you watching on Instagram, you can go through my grid and you'll find them, but then you have to wade through everything else. So it's probably the easiest place is to pop over to my YouTube channel if you want to see some of those other episodes. So I would love to know who's listening, who's participating today in this week's episode of the 5 challenges that play therapists experience. Post your name in the comments, what population you work with, what are the challenges that you're experiencing, any tips you would like to share for those as well. Join in the conversation. For those of you watching on the replay, I still want to know who's watching. Please feel free to post. I love kind of interacting after the episode is aired, and continue the conversation. For those of you listening on the podcast, please feel free to post. And for those, if you find this episode helpful and useful, please feel free to share it across your social media platforms, share it with your colleagues, help to spread the love. And let's get started with this week's episode of 5 challenges that play therapists experience. Top of the list, which I kind of already talked about, is, well, I wouldn't say top of the list. I'm going to say the 5, I'm going to go in the order-ish that I think they, I'm not even going to say that, actually. There's 5. I think they switch around which one is more important depending on what's going on with you at any point in time with the work that you're doing. So I'm just going to start with the one I hear a lot, which is parent or caregiver engagement. And this, how many of you, if you've ever thought this, oh, I wish I could just work with the child and not the parents. Oh, parents are so challenging. Oh, how can I make this disappear? Maybe they'll just fire me and my misery will be over. If you've ever thought that, you are not alone. And I find this comes up a lot, and it's usually for a variety of reasons. One of which is that you haven't really set the expectations for parent involvement. Like, have you taken that time in the beginning to share what the structure is, how you work, what's parents' role in the change process? What is that going to look like? Why is that important? And then what are the expectations for how communication is going to go? to me, if you want to avoid burnout, that's the number one thing that would be important for you to figure out in the very beginning. And I've talked about this in other episodes as well. I also go over this a lot in one of the courses that I have online called Getting Grounded Partnering with Parents in Play Therapy. That one, I go in depth in looking at parental involvement from a neuroscience and attachment lens. So, what is their role? And then, why is that important? And then, some of the practical things of things that you can do to alleviate some of that burnout, overwhelm, and exhaustion you might be experiencing. There are some things that you can do, one of which is look at your expectations. How are you communicating those to parents? And what are your expectations for how much contact they're going to have with you in between sessions? That's one thing. I remember in Play Therapy Academy, we were talk. It was Cindy, who is, if you Cindy Minto, if you want to look at one of my previous live stream episodes, where she was my guest, and we talked about kind of that neuroscience and using expressive arts and play therapy. That was a really good episode. But one of the things that we talked about, and Cindy mentioned this when she was a guest, which is that one, really setting your expectations and communicating those. Like, one of the things Cindy had to dig down deep into, and we had conversations about, I'll be honest, we have this conversation a lot in Play Therapy Academy, which is one of the reasons I created that course, which is in Play Therapy Academy, but you can also buy it separately, is really understanding the role of parents. What is your theoretical lens for understanding the role of parents? How are you communicating that to them? And what are your expectations for how you're going to respond to those crisis phone calls in between sessions, where you're getting the phone call and parents are saying, it's not working. My child is doing X, Y, and Z. Why isn't it working? And you feel this pressure that you somehow have to fix this. And maybe you failed because you're not fixing it. Maybe you're the problem as the play therapist. And that's one of the things we talk about in Play Therapy Academy, which is, let's take a step back. What's your role? What's not your role? How have you communicated expectations? How have you built relationship with parents to help them take ownership of their role? And how are you responding to those emails and text? Are you giving text updates? I never recommend that. It's my opinion. It is not an effective way to conduct therapy. It is rare. There are rare exceptions to that. And in those exceptions, it's important to do things a specific way when you're doing that. Or texting. That is why you set up regular meetings with parents. You get their engagement, you help them understand their role, you build trust and rapport. With the more complex parents, the higher acuity parents, that's going to take longer, and you need dedicated time to do that. So, if you're feeling a little frustrated that you feel like you're trying to chase down parents and get them to meet with you, or you're taking all those phone calls or text messages or emails in between sessions, if you want to avoid burnout and overwhelm and stop feeling like maybe you've somehow failed in the process, I would highly recommend that you really look at that. What are your expectations? You got to get clear on those first. And how are you communicating those to parents? What is that communication process, which includes helping them understand their role, and how are you going to respond to situations? What is that going to look like in between sessions? post post a comment, post an emoji in the comments if you have ever experienced that challenge, right? Parent and caregiver engagement. The second one that comes up a lot is, we call it compassion fatigue. Basically, the way that I conceptualize this is we therapeutically show up session to session to session with our clients. And that involves therapeutic use of self, meaning I bring myself into the relationship and I'm going to hold challenging and distressing things for my client as they navigate through that change process. I'm not responsible for the change. Clients are responsible for the change. And the analogy that I like to use, because I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, I'm Gandalf. I'm the wise guide. I try to tap into my inner Gandalf on a regular basis. And my client is the hero in the story. Regardless of that, as we walk alongside our clients, we're hearing hard things. We're holding their distress. We're creating that safe container, that safe space to walk alongside them during that journey. If you work with more complex family systems, like those who have experienced trauma, or they have intense behavioral challenges, or maybe there is some very significant co-parenting conflict and like a high divorce family situation, and you're watching the conflict play itself out between the parents, and the child is kind of in the middle there. That's hard to hold. These are hard things to hold. Or maybe you have clients whose parents have mental health challenges, maybe even personality disorders, which I consider personality disorders to be adult attachment disorders, which means you're now looking at generational histories of trauma and attachment, maybe addiction histories in there as well, maybe some other pretty significant mental health issues. That's hard to hold. And it is our job to walk alongside. So a lot of times you end up feeling disconnected, drained. You feel crispy fried, like you've got nothing left to give. Your batteries are dying down. Your well is run empty. Choose your analogy. That's you. You are also not alone. This is hard work that we do. And the thing is, this is where doing, like, I always think to myself, what can I therapeutically hold emotionally and mentally? And how do I know when I'm at my tipping point? Because my job is challenging. And then personal life can also be challenging. Therapists are not immune from the challenges of life. So it's not, there are times when we walk through our own challenging situations while we're also walking through challenging situations with clients. And we kind of have to figure out how and what do we need to do about that. One of the things that we can do is, to me, this is where community comes in. Do you have a support network? How about at work? Do you have a group of colleagues that you go to? I remember years and years and years ago, this is back when I was a special education teacher back in the 1980s. And we had it was a center. So it was kindergarten through sixth grade. We had self-contained classrooms. Every classroom had a teacher and an aide. I was a teacher. We had an aide. And these were children with emotional problems to the extent that they could not be in a regular classroom because they were not functioning very well. So what that looks like in real time is they're emotionally dysregulated more often than not, or shut down and dissociative and non-functioning more often than not. So these are challenging client students what we were working with. And so what we would do, we had at the end of on Fridays, after the kids were all on the bus on Fridays, we all sat around and had popcorn and told funny stories and vented and used each other for support and gave each other ideas and strategies. And it built a stronger team to help us not feel like we were alone doing this really hard and challenging job. So, first, I think the power of community to, even if it's maybe you're more of an introverted personality style and you're like, oh, I'd rather being around other people just drains my brain all day long. Have one or two people that you do work, chat with. Or what is it that you do that recharges your batteries? Make sure you're doing that. Fit that in. I know these days, a group of colleagues and I, we're going to do this wellness challenge for like 8 weeks, and we all set our wellness goals, and we're going to work on it as a group. And we kind of worked out this whole system, how we're going to track it and support each other, but also, you don't want to, for me, I wanted a way to say, oh, I don't want to let my team down or the group down. So I'm going to make sure I do this thing that I'm not in the mood to do right now. Right. All of these things that help to fill up your battery, do some self-care, but also it's a community, right? That we're working together and supporting each other. And that's one of the things I hear a lot in Play Therapy Academy too. Like, the members in Play Therapy Academy will always say, oh my gosh, I can't wait till we can meet again. And the thing that gets shared all the time, which to me is important, is I hearing what other people are going through, having people say, hey, you're doing a good job when you feel like you're doing a terrible job, having the group, not just my almost 35 years experience, but also the wisdom of the members in the Play Therapy Academy, and giving feedback and giving support and saying, yeah, that was really challenging. It's not just you. We would all struggle with that. And here are some ideas, or let's take a step back and break this down step by step by step to figure out what might help you, what to make a difference and help navigate through this really challenging situation that you're dealing with. Here are some resources that might be helpful for you or might be helpful for your clients. Which brings me to the third challenge, is really managing complex cases, which I've kind of talked about with the burnout and compassion fatigue, but also for if you have challenging, complex clients on your caseload, which most of us do, then these are the ones that take up a lot of mental and emotional energy, leading to feeling compassion fatigue and burnout if not managed well. These are also cases that um, make you feel like maybe you're not doing a good job, or maybe you're not the right therapist because you feel overwhelmed, lost, and confused about what's going on. Or maybe parents are mad at you for the 57th time because the situation that they're in is hard and people are mad at each other, and you're having to navigate through that, which is usually the high conflict divorce cases where parents are not co-parenting very well. Um, so these are hard. These are families that have histories of trauma, attachment issues, maybe mental health issues, maybe substance use issues, all maybe, and high conflict divorce, which if they're high conflict divorce, the likelihood there are some of those in there is very high. So what do you do, right? The impact is you don't know what to do. You feel lost and overwhelmed because you don't really understand what's going on and why it doesn't seem to be getting better. And it just feels like it's too big for you and you feel stuck. And that doesn't feel good, right? The thing is, to me, for these kind of cases, it really is useful to have a community around you or a team. If maybe your agency and this is your caseload, then having a team of people around you and you're collaborating together and working together and supporting each other. Or maybe you're in a community, maybe you have some other colleagues that you get together with. I think that's an important thing because we can't do it alone. I just don't think this is a job where we can do things alone. I think we do need each other to help us figure out what to do, to help us take a step back, break it down, what's going on, what are the case conceptualization, walking through that process of what's going on. Because before I can figure out what to do, I need to understand what's going on. That's the case conceptualization, and that informs your treatment planning. So having, maybe for you have a certain way that you go about doing that, and you can do that more by yourself. The likelihood you can always do it by yourself is probably pretty slim. I think most of us need a group or a community to kind of help us walk through those things. Getting training where you can learn more things and better understand certain mental health issues that are going on with your client. To me, that's the power of a group also, because you don't have to be the master of everything. Maybe somebody in Play Therapy Academy, we have so many people with so many different talents, which is why I've been having them on as guests to share, because I think we just have an amazing group of talented people. So maybe that might not be your expertise and you aren't up on the latest trends. Somebody else in that group will give feedback, will give tips, will give resources, will give strategies, will help to understand what it is that's going on in a way that makes more sense, that's going to help you navigate through all of those things that need to be navigated through. And then the fourth thing is, this one comes up a lot. This is one of the reasons I put some courses in Play Therapy Academy. Any of the courses I have in Play Therapy Academy, because not everybody needs Play Therapy Academy, you can find them on my website. But this is one of the reasons I put some documentation courses in Play Therapy Academy, because I feel like a big challenge we have, and there's not a lot of good training. And even in organizations, which is kind of my pet peeve in organizations, and they say, oh, go do this documentation, but you don't get any training on how to do it, because every organization is going to have some specific nuances to how they want it to done as well. There are industry standards for sure, and then how your agency wants it done based on how you're getting paid. So if you're in the United States, we have Medicaid, that is documentation heavy, meaning they require a lot of documentation. And or maybe you're taking private insurance, still documentation is required. Or maybe your agency has certain standards they need to be met for the quality assurance and making sure best practices being carried out in the agency. Documentation and getting that done, balancing documentation with therapy, is a skill. I think it's a skill we learn over time. How many, raise your hand if you've ever thought to yourself, oh yeah, I want to become a mental health professional so I can write treatment plans and progress notes. Said no play therapist or therapist ever that I've ever met. We all get into the mental health field because we want to make a difference. In play therapy, we want to make a difference in the lives of children, right? But the reality is, documentation is important. So, writing your progress notes, writing your treatment plans, doing your psychosocial assessment, and then how are you tracking progress? Are you doing progress updates? How do you manage all of that when by the end of the day you feel drained, emotionally overwhelmed, and exhausted, right? And feeling confused and overwhelmed about how the heck do you write these progress notes or do this treatment plan for play therapy? These are the challenges, right? The impact is feeling torn between having meaningful sessions and focusing on your clients and then getting way behind in your progress notes where you feel like you're drowning and there's no way out of that hole, which is a horrible place to be. Um, while you're also keeping up with the administrative things that have to be done. So how do you balance therapy and balance your documentation? That's a skill learned over time. There's an art to it, balancing that out. I feel like everybody kind of figures that out. The reality is, here's my number one tip. Don't let your progress notes go longer than 2 days at the most, because then they just snowball and digging your way out of that documentation hole is a nightmare. I've been there. I hate it. Um, so I try really hard to make sure I'm up to date on my progress notes. So one of the key things, I'll give you a couple of tips for progress notes. One of the key things for progress notes is really just for play therapy, picking out the key things that happened and then identifying what those themes represent. Then you want to line that up with your play therapy model. How would your play therapy model explain that? What language would your play therapy model use? And that's going to help you a lot with your progress notes. And then you kind of train your brain to get those done quicker and quicker and quicker. Sometimes it helps to have a template. If you have that ability to have a template, use that. One of the things you want to do is train your brain to pick the most important things, kind of summarize those in your head. Don't write every single detail that happened. Also, don't do the opposite, which is write 2 or 3 sentences. It's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, too much, too little, and just right. You want to find the just right spot and train your brain to do that. With your treatment plans, this is where using your play therapy model comes to be important as well. Think about the language of your play therapy model and what tasks have to be accomplished based on the problem that you've identified underlying the issue that's bringing them to treatment. And then you kind of break that down, but use the language of your play therapy model for in those goals and objectives. And then you're going to tie your treatment plan to your progress notes. You're going to use language from your treatment plan in your progress notes and train your brain to think that way. And that's going to help you get through those progress notes and tie everything together so that you look amazing for the quality assurance people who are looking at your documentation. But also maybe you're in private practice and you don't have anybody looking over your documentation. You still want to maintain best practice standards. So if you're interested in learning more about some of those trainings that I have, then you can pop over to my website, and which is RH. I'll put that on here. If you're watching on LinkedIn or YouTube, it's on the screen. If you're watching on Instagram, it's not on the screen. So the website is rhplaytherapytraining.com. You want to go to the courses page. It's Renewing Hearts Play Therapy Training. You can find that information on there. These are all things that are in Play Therapy Academy. So if you're in Play Therapy Academy, all of the courses, all of these getting grounded in play therapy courses are in the Play Therapy Academy program. So another thing is feeling, this is the fifth thing, which is feeling isolated in your field. So maybe you're in an agency where you don't have a lot of collaboration, or maybe you're doing predominantly teletherapy and you're not in an office, so you're not having connection with other people. Or maybe you're in private practice and you don't really have a team around you that you're consulting with. Or maybe you're in an agency where it's not the healthiest of agencies. Or maybe your agency, nobody there knows play therapy. I hear this one a lot. People get hired to work with children, but then there's no training and support for how to work with children. And pretty much everyone else in the agency mostly works with adults. So not really having access to play therapy specific support. That's something I hear all the time when I'm on phone calls with people about Play Therapy Academy, and how being part of a community that supports your growth and development to learn play therapy can be really helpful for your professional development, as well as feeling competent in what you're doing. So that lack of collaboration and lack of connection can really reduce your opportunities for learning and getting feedback, and really feeling like you have support from other people who get it, other like-minded people. When you say X, Y, and Z happened, they're like, oh yeah, we've had that happen too. That's a big thing. I think is a really important thing, to make sure you're part of a community where you can have access to resources, support other people who understand what you're going through, because then it feels like you're not alone. That's going to then help to reduce any compassion fatigue, or feeling like you're doing a terrible job, or feeling overwhelmed and burned out by really challenging clients on your caseload. That community can really provide that support to you. And I think really strong, healthy agencies will create that for their therapists that they have on staff. And if you don't have that, then I would say find it. Make sure you get into a community of like-minded play therapists who get it for you. So that is it for today. I'm going to do just a really quick recap, which is parent engagement, parent caregiver engagement. Be clear about your expectations, communicate those expectations, including how often and what that's going to look like, what contact with you is going to look like in between sessions. Get really clear on that. Burnout and compassion fatigue, really understanding what you can emotionally, therapeutically hold, and recognizing those signs of when you are getting to that crispy stage. And what do you need to refill your bucket? Do you need to do some self-care? Do you need to get out? For me, that's nature, getting out, going for a walk, connecting with my loved ones and family, friends and family, using my support network, getting support, going to trainings to learn more. Sometimes it's just nice to go and learn things so you feel a little bit better, but you also hear other people are going through the same thing you are. Also, managing complex cases. These are hard. I feel like when you have complex cases, you need a team of people around you. You need a community of people that are going to help you step back, take a look at what's going on, break it down, come up with some suggestions, help you navigate through it, and come up with a plan and get some resources, because these are hard cases to do alone. The other is balancing documentation and therapy, right? The ongoing struggle. This one, as long as you're in mental health, as long as you're a play therapist, this is probably one of those things you're going to have to figure out how to balance that fine art of getting your documentation done and doing that in a way that accurately represents what's going on in the treatment process, because your documentation tells the story of your client. Treatment plans are like the GPS. Where are we going and how are we getting there? Progress notes are your kind of your session by session storytelling of how your client is navigating through their journey of change, right? I like to use the hero's journey. The progress notes tell the hero's journey. The treatment plan provides the roadmap. So when you get off track or something happens, you go back to your roadmap, or you know, fix your roadmap. Maybe you need to update it a little bit. And then the last one is feeling isolated in the field. If you're feeling like you are out there all alone, then I would say get with a community of people who understand. To me, that is the most effective way to, one, help when you're dealing with compassion fatigue and burnout, helping you work through and get support for challenging and difficult clients, those complex cases, and dealing with, coming up with some strategies when working with parents. So when we're isolated, I think we have a tendency to get burned out more, and burnout is really an ethics issue in many ways, because we're not able to show up and therapeutically provide the support needed, because you can't give away from a dry well, right? You can't give water from a dry well. We have to fill up. We have to make sure we're filling up. And when we're isolated, that can be a bit more of a challenge. So that is it for today. Again, if you found this information helpful, please feel free to like it, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you're following on YouTube, share the information with your colleagues, post a comment, join the conversation. If you're listening on the podcast, I would love a review to find out what's been useful and helpful for you. And if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy, I do have some openings. Play Therapy Academy is what I call like my VIP like membership, where we meet twice a month to give you support. There are case presentations each time. So if you're not presenting, you're still learning from other people and the wisdom of the group in terms of getting ideas and feedback. So if you're presenting, you're getting a ton of support and feedback. If you're not presenting, you're still getting a ton of support and feedback, because you're learning by what you're seeing going on in other cases. So you get a lot of support that way. And then we have a group chat for support in between our twice monthly meetings. So you don't have to wait until we're meeting again. You can post and get support in our private group chat. And then there's also courses in there to help give you that skill building to learn how to write treatment plans, progress notes. Why is a psychosocial assessment important? What is case conceptualization? Why do I need case conceptualization? What are the foundations of play therapy that set it apart from every other expressive arts modality? And how to work with parents more effectively. All of that. So you have the courses in there to provide some knowledge. And then the magic of it is, though, the community support and getting that support from not only me with my 35 years experience, but also the wisdom of the group. So if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy, then pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. Go over to the supervision page. You can read more about Play Therapy Academy. If you're interested, schedule a 30-minute video call with me. There's no obligation. We'll talk through what your issues are and whether or not Play Therapy Academy is a good fit for you. So schedule that 30-minute video call with me. And if you're interested, also we're going to post the links in the comments. So feel free to check the comments or message me. Feel free to message me. And I will see you guys next week. Bye for now.